Hello Primary 5, how are you my dear students? Today I'm going to explain Unit 3 Lesson 2 Environmental Balance. Look here at this picture. What you can see in this picture? We can see many things. We can see plants, we can see water, rocks, soil, and also we can find some animals that live between these plants. This is called ecosystem. What is the ecosystem? The ecosystem is any natural area that includes living organisms such as plants and animals and non-living things such as water, soil and air. This is called ecosystem. This is called ecosystem. Here we have the components of the ecosystem. We have the living organisms such as plants and animals. Also the algae, these green organisms that live on the water, they are called algae. And we have also the fungi. So these are the living organisms that can live in the ecosystem. Plants and animals, algae and fungi. And also non-living things such as air and soil and the water. These are the non-living things that we can find in the ecosystem. So the components of the ecosystem, we can find living organisms and non-living things. Classification of the ecosystem. We have three types, we have three kinds of ecosystems. We have a small ecosystem such as area of land or water pond. And we have large ecosystem like the forest, ocean, desert, and very large ecosystem, or we can say the unified ecosystem. It is the universe. Here we have examples on the small ecosystem such as the water pond and a piece of land or area of land. This is a small ecosystem. And also we have the large ecosystem as the forest, as the desert, or as the ocean. These are the large ecosystems. And we have the universe. It is the very large ecosystem or the unified ecosystem. There are many relationships in any ecosystem. Number one is the relationship between plants and soil. We know that plants depend on the soil to absorb water and salts, which are important for photosynthesis process. The plants cannot grow without soil. So there is the relationship between plants and soil. The second relationship in the ecosystem between plants and animals. Animals feed on plants to get food and energy. As this rabbit, it feeds on the plants to get the energy. Number three, the relationship between different animals. Some animals feed on other animals to get food and energy. So we have three relationships. Between number one, between plants and soil. Number two, between plants and between animals and plants. Number three, between animals and animals. These relationships between each other, they lead to the environmental balance. What is the meaning of environmental balance? Environmental balance, it is the balance among the components of the ecosystem. It is the balance among the components in the ecosystem. So the relationships between the plants and soil, between animals and the plants, between animals and animals, they lead to the environmental balance. What is the environmental balance? It is the balance among the components of the ecosystem, between the components of the ecosystem. And there are factors that harm or disturb the environmental balance. We have two main factors that disturb the environmental balance or they can harm the environmental balance. They are the natural changes and the man interference. Number one, the natural changes. The natural changes or the changes in the natural conditions in the ecosystem causes the disturbance that leads to disappearance of some organisms as dinosaurs or appearance of other organisms. So the first factor that can disturb the environmental balance or that can harm the environmental balance, the natural changes. The natural changes can cause disappearance of some organisms as the dinosaurs or appearance of other organisms. Number two, the man interference. The man interference or some human activities lead to the disturbance of the environmental balance as number one, cutting trees. Number two, eroding soil. Eroding soil means taking the soil from its place. So these are the activities that can harm the environmental balance. And we have number three, the pollution. Also the pollution can affect or harm the environmental balance. And we have the burning the forests. So the main interference or these activities can harm or can disturb the environmental balance. We have four activities that disturb the environmental balance as cutting trees, pollution, eroding the soil, or burning forests. We also have the factors that keep the environmental balance. We have two main factors. We have two main relationships that keep the environmental balance as the predation and the saprophytism. Number one, the predation. How the predation keeps the environmental balance. First, do you remember what is the predation? The predation, it is the relationship between two living organisms in which one of the living organisms devours the other. This is the predation. Why the predation keeps the environmental balance? Because the predation organizes the number of prey population and the predators or the predation help in getting rid of weak or sick members. So, if there were no predators in the ecosystem, the environmental balance will be disturbed or will be harmed. How? If we don't have predators, this will disturb the environmental balance? Yes. How? Imagine with me that we have an area of land that doesn't have any predator and it has only prey as the rabbit population as you see here. What will happen if we have only prey and we don't have any predator in this area? Number one, the number of prey will increase as you see here in this picture. Number two, the competition between the prey will appear. So here they will not find any food, so they will be weak and die. So if we don't have predators in the area and we have only prey, number one, what will happen? The number of prey will increase and the food resources become not enough. Number two, the competition among the prey population will appear, so the prey will be very weak and die. So the predators or the predation relationship is very important to keep the environmental balance. If we don't have predators, the number of prey will increase and the food resources will be not enough, and the competition, as in the second picture, the competition between the prey will appear, and the last one, they will be very weak and die. And we have the second factor that helps in the environmental, or that keeps the environmental balance. It is the saprophytism. The saprophytism, it is the food relationship in which the saprophytes, or the decomposers, as the mushroom, as fungi, as the bacteria, they get their food by decomposing food remains or dead bodies or dead organisms. Here, the saprophytism, it is very important. Why? Because it is get rid, or it helps in getting rid of dead bodies by decomposing them. As you see here in this picture, the decomposers, they decompose the dead body of this rabbit to get its food, and also put the important materials as carbon, as nitrogen, as the phosphorus in the soil. They are very important for growing new plants. So the saprophytism relationship is very important in the environmental balance. They help in getting rid of dead bodies by decomposing them, as in this picture. And number two, it is very important to recycle the chemical elements as carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus to the environment. While the decomposers, or the saprophytes, they decompose the dead bodies or the food remains to get their food, they put these compounds or these elements as carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus to the soil, so the new plants and the other organisms get benefit from them. As you see here in this picture, here the decomposers decompose, or they break down the dead bodies to get their food. At the same time, they add the elements in their body, in the body, as carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus to the environment, and the other organisms as plants, they get benefit, so we will have rich soil for growing plants. So the saprophytism, it is very important to keep the environmental balance. We have two factors, they are very important to keep the environmental balance. They are the predation and the saprophytism. And also the saprophytism, or the saprophytes, they are guards of the environment. Why? Do you think why? Why? Because they keep the environmental balance, and they help in getting rid of dead bodies and food remains. If we don't have the saprophytes or the decomposers, we will have the dead bodies, and the food remains will cover the land, or will cover the earth. So the saprophytes or the decomposers are guards of the environment. Also, we use the saprophytes or the decomposers in many industries, as in the bread and yogurt and cheese, and also we use some decomposers or some saprophytes in making alcohols. So we use the saprophytism is very important in keeping the environmental balance and in industry. Thank you very much, my lovely students, and goodbye.